Hello, my name is Joanna Dillman. I'm a graduate student at Queen's University of Charlotte. Welcome to my final Inquiry Project digital presentation for my COM 616 course. The course I'm currently taking is entitled Communicating Mindfully. For the course Inquiry Project, I was directed to identify a communication ethics problem that I have encountered or witnessed. Secondly, I would need to describe and analyze the problem utilizing an appropriate communication ethics theory. Finally, I would evaluate an appropriate communication ethical resolution for the identified problem. Throughout the semester, I have learned about communication ethics and the various goods they protect or promote. One type of communication ethics that I am particularly interested in is business and professional communication ethics. Our text, Communication Ethics Literacy, written by Ronald Arnett, Janie Fritz, and Leanne Bell, indicates when people depend upon a given organization for their livelihood, continuing existence of the company becomes the baseline good. Therefore, business and professional communication ethics protects and promotes the survival of a company. Through dialectic of direction and change, which is the willingness to follow a particular path with the courage to move in a different direction when necessary, business continuity is preserved. But what happens when everything changes in an instant? Organizational crises have been described as specific, unexpected, and non-routine organizationally based event or series of events which creates high levels of uncertainty and threat or perceived threat to an organization's high priority goals. Oftentimes, operations may cease, leaving facilities closed and key personnel distracted, incapacitated, or missing. During the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina, Louisiana Community and Technical College System campuses experienced facility loss, displaced personnel and students, and communication system failure. Although the catastrophe put business continuity in jeopardy, the leaders of LCTCS understood that direction and change together would make it possible to respond to the crisis and allow the business to survive. The purpose of this paper is to examine the post-Katrina communications of the Louisiana Community and Technical College System, LCTCS, concentrating on contextual communication ethics and applying business and professional communication ethics to demonstrate how the organization learned from the catastrophic event to change in order to survive. Findings. The Louisiana Community and Technical College System LCTCS was created in 1999 by the state of Louisiana as a means of providing an educational alternative to individuals who did not choose to pursue a 4-year degree but rather wanted to attain an associate degree, certificate, or diploma, which would ultimately lead them to the world of work. Prior to Katrina, the LCTCS was comprised of 7 community colleges, 2 technical community colleges, and 40 technical college campuses spread out in 60 of the 64 parishes within Louisiana. At the time of Hurricane Katrina, the Louisiana Technical College campuses operated under a centralized structure promoting a one college with 40 campuses concept managed by districts. With a collective enrollment of about 60,000 students in credit and occupational training programs each semester, approximately 5,500 employees as of August 2005, and the indications of additional funding by the Louisiana legislature, the future of the 2-year educational institution was promising. Preparing for hurricanes and other severe weather is a common occurrence for Louisiana residents. When LCTCS officials saw the forecast for Hurricane Katrina's trajectory and strength, precautions were taken. These precautions included updating the institution's call tree, securing the institution's 2 large community colleges and 4 campuses of the Louisiana Technical College located within the greater New Orleans metropolitan area. And when the storm grew closer, LCTCS closed relevant institutions located within the projected path through at least Tuesday, August 30th. The purpose was to allow students, faculty, and staff ample opportunity to secure personal belongings or evacuate if necessary. With all possible precautions taken, the plan was to communicate after the storm passed to begin assessing damage and initiating the plan for the recovery. Katrina made landfall on August 29, 2005 as a very large storm. At its peak, maximum winds stretched 25 to 30 nautical miles, and its extremely wide lines of hurricane force winds extended at least 75 nautical miles to the east from the center. Wind speeds over 140 miles per hour were recorded in southeast Louisiana, with gusts as high as 100 miles per hour in New Orleans. A large storm surge ranging from 10 to 28 feet devastated coastal areas across southeastern Louisiana and coastal Mississippi. The surge and battering waves smashed into levees which collapsed, causing extensive flooding throughout the New Orleans region. Ultimately, 80% of New Orleans and large portions of nearby parishes became flooded, and the floodwaters did not recede for weeks. Rainfall exceeded 8 to 10 inches along the hurricane's path. Villadenson and De Los Santos' 2007 paper described 22 million tons of debris resulted from Katrina, which is enough to fill the Empire State Building 40 times. Hurricane Katrina was nothing less than total devastation to the Gulf Coast area. Higher education institutions in the area reported about 84,000 students were displaced by the disaster. Included in that total was 39.6% of LCTCS enrollment. In addition, 1,400 of the system's employees were displaced. The system's two community colleges, which was Delgado and Nunez, in the impacted areas suffered damage to 80% of campus buildings and was inundated with floodwaters of over 6 feet. 3 campuses belonging to the Louisiana Technical College, Sidney Collier, Slidell, and Sullivan, were also affected. The Sidney Collier campus, located in the Lower Ninth Ward, was completely destroyed. The Slidell campus was flooded with over 8 feet of water. And lastly, the Sullivan campus, located in Bogalusa, sustained facility damage due to the high winds. The main office of LCTCS, located in Baton Rouge, sustained only minimal damage. However, Hurricane Katrina was as much as a communication disaster as it was a natural and bureaucratic disaster. Power outages in the Baton Rouge area, lack of gasoline in excess of a week, as well as information technology failures, caused severe communication gaps. No one, not even the state of Louisiana, could have anticipated the widespread devastation or the amount of time that would pass before people could even re-enter the region. Once the initial shock over the magnitude of the storm passed, communication began. Essential personnel were contacted to determine whether they were safe and to ascertain their location. The chief executive officers then began the task of locating personnel in the affected areas. Due to power outages and the lack of telephone coverage in the area, the Sullivan campus dean convened his leadership team, drafted a list of all faculty and staff belonging to the campus, and proceeded to personally visit each member's home to ascertain their safety. LCTCS established a call center to identify displaced employees and students, to gather contact information, and to answer questions. In addition, a website was launched to keep stakeholders updated on the recovery status. Although those inside the state could not reach this website, those outside the state would be able to access the Internet. Public service announcements were developed and distributed statewide to inform students and employees about contacting their colleges. Finally, multiple advertisements placed in various newspapers where evacuees would have a high probability of accessing in order to provide another avenue to communicate information to displaced personnel and students. Outside of the critical external communications, the system established hurricane updates to inform legislatures, stakeholders, and national organizations about what was occurring during the aftermath of the storm and throughout the recovery. As this disaster unfolded, there was overwhelming support from organizations and colleges across the country offering financial assistance. Weekly meetings with chancellors of the affected institutions were scheduled, and one of the most important actions was to have phone meetings with the Florida Community College System leadership to discuss the recovery, as Florida had also experienced a series of similar major disasters a few years earlier. Although faculty and staff were dispersed across the country, many evacuated to the greater Baton Rouge metropolitan area. Therefore, meetings for faculty, staff, and students of the affected institutions were hosted to provide information and answer questions. At the Sullivan campus, the campus dean held staff meetings daily at the picnic tables located behind the facility to assess damage and to ascertain critical needs to resume operations. Once the lines of communication were open, although limited, the focus shifted to operations. A base of operations was established by LCTCS at a central location to serve faculty, staff, and students. Information technology personnel quickly established temporary offices, setting up computers, telephone lines, establishing BlackBerry services for key personnel, and working with institutions to reestablish information technology connectivity. One of the tasks of immediate importance was the processing of payroll for the displaced employees. With one of the system's community colleges not being part of the centralized payroll as the other institutions within the system were, payroll staff from various LCTCS institutions congregated and manually inputted the data for the college's 900 employees and successfully processed payroll timely. For the Sullivan campus, the dean provided the facility parking lot to an electrical company immediately following the storm, which enabled power to be restored to the campus within 2 weeks. Phone lines at the Sullivan campus were restored 1 month after Katrina. According to the dean, the campus negotiated for 3 weeks with local businesses to assist with the reopening of the campus and then was told to stop by the LTC central office. The systems office had no way of ascertaining safety the safety of the affected facility, which was affected by rain and therefore had damage to the facility. Therefore, they required air samples to be taken before repairs could continue. The campus dean arranged for air samples to be taken during the 4th week of recovery. Next on the list were student services. LCTCS leadership determined it was paramount to attend to the students whose lives had been completely disrupted. Perimeters were established to address financial aid disbursements that occurred prior to Katrina and to address the matters of students re-enrolling at other institutions and accessing remaining funds. At the urging of the Board of Regents, all higher education agreed to allow students to re-enroll in other 2-year or 4-year institutions during the fall 2005 semester without regard for payment of additional tuition or the presentation of transcripts, as most records were not accessible to students or staff. Supplying records and tuition issues were to be addressed in the spring of 2006. Other offers of assistance from outside organizations also helped LCTCS serve students' needs. For example, the Sloan semester provided students an opportunity to enroll in online courses free of charge. The Lumina Foundation for Education and Scholarship America provided services by establishing a relief fund, enabling students who re-enrolled in another institution to access assistance through the financial aid office at the institution where they were relocating. In addition, counseling was provided by some LCTCS institutions to assist with the many grieving students and the employees in coming to terms with the life-changing event. Prior to the realization of major budget challenges, the public's post-secondary education institutions agreed to continue paying displaced faculty and staff until a determination could be made about the fiscal outlook for the state. Further continued employment through transfer opportunities were offered to displaced employees who permanently relocated to other areas of the state. However, many displaced employees who chose not to permanently relocate continued to receive salary and benefits until November of 2005. The Sullivan campus reopened on October 10, 2005, with an enrollment of 495 students and expanded program offerings as a result of the closure of the Slidell campus. Both affected community colleges, both Delgado and Nunez, were able to rebuild and open for the spring 2006 semester. Throughout the recovery, LCTCS endeavored to survive in the affected areas by responding to change and staying true to their mission of changing lives and creating futures. Discussion. The context of Hurricane Katrina presented several competing ethical goods. For example, the goods protected by public discourse, interpersonal, and organizational communication ethics were all threatened. However, this paper focuses on the good protected by business and professional communication ethics, which is the survival and competitiveness of the company. In the aftermath of Katrina, LCTCS faced structurally damaged facilities, displaced personnel and students, and communication system failures, which threatened the organization's ability to complete its mission. It was imperative that the leadership team adequately respond to the disaster in order to maintain the survival of LCTCS within the affected areas. To do so, it appears the organization utilized the prescriptive approach of discourse of renewal for their communicative responsiveness. There are 4 theoretical objectives central to the discourse of renewal: organizational learning, ethical communication, and a perspective rather than retrospective vision, and sound organizational rhetoric. This study will analyze the post-Katrina communications of the Louisiana Community and Technical College system according to the Discourse and Renewal Framework and demonstrate its resulting commitment to business and professional communication ethics. Organizational learning. Learning is an essential to an effective response to crisis. By evaluation and self-reflection of the event, leadership attends to the questions of what worked and what changes might now assist. Evaluating and learning from the event is a central part to business and professional communication ethics. Lessons learned will provide justification for change and account publicly for how and why the organization implemented direction and change. In the LCTCS case, Hurricane Katrina prompted the system and its institutions to craft more relevant disaster recovery plans and regular meetings to discuss and update if necessary. The recovery plans included communication plans required before and after a disaster, facility checklists to conduct when the threat is known and after, and finally work assignments to key personnel to ensure essential functions of the institution can be moved to temporary location if the need arises. The aftermath of Hurricane Katrina made the LCTCS realize the centralized structure promoting a one college with 40 campuses concept managed by districts was no longer effective. Under the centralized structure, the campus leaders could not work with local officials to make location-related decisions, for example, campus closures in the event of an emergency, or working with business and industry. The lessons learned resulted in the proposal from the LCTCS to Louisiana legislatures, one of its stakeholders, to fundamentally alter the form, structure, and direction of the LTC campuses. Approved legislative changes gave greater autonomy to individual colleges so they may better serve Louisiana communities. Ethical communication. A second key factor in creating a renewing response is communicating ethically before, during, and after the crisis. The discourse of renewal theory believes ethical communication involves having strong stakeholder relationships, a provisional response to the crisis, and communication that meets the ethical standard of significant choice. This prescriptive approach, which will overall protect the good of the company's survival, demands the attentiveness to interpersonal relationships with organizational stakeholders. To accomplish this attentiveness, the discourse of renewal approach requires the organization to practice strong positive positions such as openness, honesty, responsibility, accountability, and trustworthiness with key organizational stakeholders. In the LCTCS case, the system had numerous stakeholders that included state legislation, students, employees, businesses, and industry. Prior to the storm, LCTCS had developed a strong positive relationship with its stakeholders, as evidenced by the support of legislation, student enrollment, employee and business and industry surveys. Evidence shows LCTCS continued to value these relationships during the aftermath of the storm as well. This is evident by the establishment of the call center, a temporary base of operations to address immediate concerns, timely processing of payroll, constant communication with legislator and local officials, student counseling service, and partnerships with other higher education institutions to assist with students continue their education while the system recovered from the storm. These relationships served as a reservoir of goodwill and support that helped the system get through the crisis. Without these relationships, an important component of the system's communicative response would have been missing. In the LCTCS case, it was obvious a natural disaster had caused the crisis. During the lengthy recovery process, there would have been ample opportunity to place blame for the delay of recovery efforts. However, LCTCS leaders did not engage in the blame game. Instead, it focused on the immediate response to the crisis, supportiveness of victims, and the emerging themes of rebuilding and renewal in all communications. Throughout the study's findings, the actions of the Sullivan campus dean were documented. Mr. Mickey Murphy, a former drill sergeant in the United States Army, he was a very prominent figure in the Bogalusa area. These characteristics appeared to have served him well during the Hurricane Katrina aftermath. Once the safety of his crew was ascertained, he began engaging the employees to help rebuild the campus. Instead of waiting for the state resources as the Slidell campus dean did, Mr. Murphy utilized the knowledge of his carpentry, welding, and HVAC instructors to get the campus operational within 6 weeks from the storm. The survival characteristics were not observed from the Slidell campus dean. Instead, she waited until she received directives from Baton Rouge on how to proceed. The lengthy delay caused more damage to the campus facilities. Ultimately, the Slidell campus was permanently closed and would later be required to be demolished. During the recovery period following Hurricane Katrina, LCTCS could have withheld information or provided biased information to students who desired to continue their education at another institution. Essentially, the system would be directing its customers to another provider. However, it was evident the system went over and beyond to inform students on ways to continue their academic goals. The invaluable establishment of partnerships with the American Association of Community Colleges, which acted as a clearinghouse for the many offers of support from two-year institutions, the Southern Region Education Board, which offered a special semester allowing students to enroll online, and the communication of these partnerships provided the students a choice in the matter. Perspective vision. A third feature of a renewing response is communication focused on the future rather than the past. An organization that focuses on the future promotes organizational learning, optimism, and their core values is conducting ongoing communicative practices of a unity of contraries of direction and change. Organizations focusing on renewal are typically optimistic and building a vision for the future. Review of the communications from LCTCS following the aftermath shows an emerging theme focusing on rebuilding and renewal. Even when recovery effort delays and the budget constraints were realized, the organization remained optimistic. The Sullivan campus was able to capitalize from the disaster by utilizing displaced faculty to grow their programs offered at the campus and thus better serve students and business partners in the area. Throughout the crisis, LCTCS remained focused on its vision to changing lives and creating futures through education. Effective organizational rhetoric. The final component of the discourse of renewal theory requires effective organizational rhetoric involving leadership with vision and a strong positive reputation to effectively frame the crisis for stakeholders and persuade them to move beyond the event. Cheney and Lair, the 2005 paper, explains organizational rhetoric involves drawing attention to issues and concerns in contemporary organizational life with a focus on issues of persuasion and identification. This component is another way leaders of an organization can clarify direction and change to ensure the survival and competitiveness of the company. LCTCS placed the importance on students and employees during the aftermath of Katrina. Institutional leaders, starting with the system president, set the tone for rebuilding and renewal. This was accomplished by focusing on the human equation in all crisis communications. Secondly, campus leaders like Mr. Mickey Murphy used rhetoric to convince employees to split their time between rebuilding their homes and rebuilding the campus. This focus enabled both employees and students to move past the crisis. Conclusion. Hurricane Katrina caused destruction throughout the Gulf Coast area. With damaged facilities, displaced personnel and students, and communication structure failure, LCTCS was required to pivot and change in order to survive the aftermath. By utilizing the discourse of renewal prescriptive approach to crisis communication, LCTCS provided the communicative responsiveness required to uphold its commitment to business and professional communication ethics. LCTCS not only survived the disaster, but rebuilt and even renewed themselves because they learned from the event, demonstrated by changing their organizational structure, all while maintaining openness and public accountability. For LCTCS, Hurricane Katrina was not only a time of destruction and loss, but it was also a time of change and renewal. Recommendations. No one could have imagined or prepared for the devastation caused by Hurricane Katrina. How one reacts to the devastation is another story. Arnett, Fritz, and Bell explain the goods of survival and competitiveness with the caveat that how one protects and promotes these goods makes all the difference in the identity of a company and the character of a given business and professional communication ethics commitment. The LCTCS case study presented outlines how commitment to business and professional communication ethics can be implemented during a crisis situation. LCTCS used the disaster to learn, pivot, and change in order to survive in the affected areas. Although my study focuses on protecting the good of business and professional communication ethics, using organizational communication ethics as a way to evaluate the issue would also be beneficial. Hurricane Katrina caused a change in the historical moment, and thus the good of the dwelling place needed to be renegotiated. Although many within LCTCS recall the reasoning behind 40 campuses, one college model, Hurricane Katrina forced the organization to realize change was warranted when local leaders could not make the necessary decisions to assist with the campus recovery. As outlined with the Sullivan campus, the campus leader felt empowered and responsible to return the campus to operational status. Granted, this could have been due to his background and personality traits. As outlined in the Slidell campus, the campus leader did not feel empowered and rather depended on the systems office to give direction on next steps. This decision ultimately caused the campus to close permanently. I believe the problem was resolved when LCTCS decided to propose change in the organizational structure of the Louisiana Technical Colleges to allow more autonomy at the campus level. The proposal was later approved by the state legislatures. Implications. LCTCS took the necessary communicative responsiveness efforts following the devastation of Hurricane Katrina in order to survive in the affected areas. This was evident by the organization's efforts to locate personnel and reach out to students through various avenues immediately following the storm. In addition, recovery efforts were communicated through these established channels. Once communication lines were open, the focus shifted to operations, which quickly provided students an opportunity to continue their education and personnel to be paid. The organization also took this opportunity to learn from the event. It was decided the 40 campus, one college model was no longer effective for the institution. Therefore, the organization decided to propose a change through Louisiana legislation, which would allow the organization to pivot direction and provide local autonomy to the campuses. By changing the organization structure, should a crisis occur in the future, campus deans will have the autonomy and empowerment to work with local officials on the immediate needs of the campus, which could result in a quicker recovery time. An organization's failure to learn and change questions its commitment to viability. In the case of LCTCS, failure to make the organizational change would have resulted in the LCTCS maintaining a 40 campus, one college model, and thus local campus leaders would not be able to respond as quickly to crises and the needs of local business and industry partners. This would result in the organization's long-term success and survival being threatened. Suggestions for future research. The need for continued learning and discernment of communication ethics literacy is necessary. As stated many times throughout this work, Hurricane Katrina presented a historical moment in which multiple goods were threatened. With multiple views of the good existing in the marketplace of ideas, it is important to learn from the differences presented. Although this work focuses on the application of business and professional communication ethics, further study on the other communication ethics principles should be performed. For example, it would be interesting to study the interpersonal relationships of the Sullivan campus dean and the personnel he required to report to work. These employees experienced frustration by the requirement to work while their personal life and property were in turmoil. This is an example in which the good of one communication ethic jeopardizes the good of another communication ethic. Additional work is needed to identify possible solutions. I hope you've enjoyed the summary of my work. Please let me know if you have any questions.